Saul, David, Solomon. The rise and fall of united Israel. Before Israel had kings, they had God. No throne, no crown, no human ruler. But the people wanted more. They looked at other nations and saw power they could recognize, a king they could see, a voice they could follow, a man to lead them into battle. And so they asked. First Samuel 8:5. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." It sounded simple, but it was a turning point, because what they were asking for would reshape their future. God gave them what they wanted. Not one king, but a line of them. And through these kings, a story would unfold, not just of power, but of the heart. This is the story of three kings and what their choices revealed. Saul. Israel had asked for a king, and God gave them one. A man who looked the part, strong, tall, commanding. But a crown does not secure a kingdom, obedience does. And Saul's downfall did not happen all at once. It happened in steps. The first crack did not look like rebellion. It looked like pressure. The Philistines were gathering. Israel's army was trembling. And time was running out. The prophet Samuel had given a clear instruction: wait 7 days. He would come and offer the sacrifice. 1 Samuel chapter 13, 8-9. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. He did not wait. Not because he didn't believe, but because he couldn't handle the pressure. He stepped into a role that was not his. That was the beginning. Not a public collapse, but a quiet shift. A king who could not wait on God was already drifting from him. Then came the moment that would define Saul's reign. A command so clear, it left no room for interpretation. 1 Samuel 15:3. Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. No negotiation, no adjustment, just obedience. 1 Samuel 15:9. But Saul and the army spared Agag and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak, they totally destroyed. He obeyed partially, and partial obedience is still disobedience. 1 Samuel 15:22-23. But Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." This was no longer a warning. This was rejection. Saul was still king in position, but no longer king in God's favor. The final step was not just disobedience, it was desperation. God had stopped answering him. No dreams, no prophets, no direction, just silence. And instead of returning to God, Saul went somewhere else, somewhere he once outlawed. 1 Samuel 28:7. Saul then said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her." "There is one in Endor," they said. "A king, chosen by God, seeking a witch." Not for power, but for answers. 1 Samuel 28:11-12. Then the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." Even in death, The message did not change. 1 Samuel 28:16-17. Samuel said, "Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David." This was the end, not just of a reign, but of a relationship. Saul began as a king chosen by God, but step by step, he stopped waiting, he stopped obeying, and finally, he stopped seeking God altogether. And when a king stops seeking God, the throne cannot save him. David, the king after God's heart. While Saul still sat on the throne, God had already chosen another, not from a palace, not from a battlefield, but from a field where sheep were kept. David, a shepherd, unknown to many but not unknown to God. 1 Samuel 16:6-7. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint a new king, he looked at strength, he looked at appearance, but God was looking at something else. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. David wasn't even invited at first. He had to be called in from the field. 1 Samuel 16. Samuel anoints David. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate." When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Not because he looked like a king, but because his heart aligned with God. David's rise would not begin with a crown, but with a confrontation. A giant stood before Israel, mocking them, defying them, and no one moved. Goliath was his name. 1 Samuel 17. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim, between Soko and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels bia. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield-bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me." If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistine's words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurancy from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage, and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are, and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around, because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and, with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. 1 Samuel 17:45. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. No armor, no sword, just faith. And from that moment, David was no longer invisible. He went on to win many wars, and as a result turned into a man King Saul hated. Even though Saul chased after his life for the fear that he might become king if not killed off, and to preserve the kingship for his son Jonathan, the Lord protected David in all instances. After Saul died, another name rose, Ishbosheth, the son of Saul. Because even though David had been chosen by God, he had not yet taken the whole throne. He was only recognized as king in Judah. So 2 Samuel 2:4. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. When David was told that it was the men from Jabesh-Gilead who had buried Saul, he sent messengers to them to say to them, "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul your master by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor, because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul, your master, is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them." Meanwhile, Abner son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth son of Saul and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Ishbosheth son of Saul was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Ishbosheth was placed on the throne, not by the prophet of God, but by the will of a man, Abner. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Judah was 7 years and 6 months. 2 kings, 1 nation, a divided kingdom, a division that was strictly man-made. In time, David became king over all Israel, not by force, but through process. 2 Samuel 5:3-4. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. He united the tribes, he captured Jerusalem, he established a kingdom that stood strong. 2 Samuel 5:10, and he became more and more powerful, because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Everything was working: victory, expansion, stability. But success can test a man differently than struggle. It happened, not on a battlefield, but on a quiet evening. 2 Samuel 11:2. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. He looked, and then he acted. 2 Samuel 11:4. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. Her name was Bathsheba, and she was not his wife. And when the situation could no longer be hidden, David made a darker decision. 2 Samuel 11:14-15. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die." Uriah, a loyal man, sent to his death by his own king. David had everything: power, authority, favor, and in one moment, he used it for himself. But God does not ignore sin, even in kings. 2 Samuel 12:1-12. The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, "There were 2 men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, 'As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity.' Then Nathan said to David, 'You are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah, and if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says: out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. No excuses, no hiding, just truth. And this is where David's story changes. 2 Samuel 12:13. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. He did not defend himself. He did not shift blame. He broke. This is what set David apart. Not perfection, but repentance. David fell, but he returned. And though his actions carried consequences, his heart never fully turned away from God. And after David came a king who would inherit everything he built, but not everything he learned. After David came his son Solomon. But Solomon's story did not begin with the throne. It began with something deeper. 2 Samuel 12:24-25. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. Before he wore a crown, he was loved by God. Given a name, Jedediah, meaning beloved of the Lord. And by position, he was not first in line, not the eldest son, not the obvious choice. The throne should have gone to another. But kingship then in Israel was never secured by birth order. It was established by God's decision. 1 Kings 1:30. I will surely carry out this very day what I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel. Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne in my place. Chosen not by tradition, but by divine appointment. And when his reign began, it carried something no king before him had fully known. Not constant war, not survival battles, but peace. 1 Kings 5:4. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster, a kingdom at rest, a throne without conflict. Solomon became the first king to fully rule in peace, loved by God, chosen beyond position, established in peace. And yet his greatest challenge was still ahead. At the beginning of his reign, God came to Solomon with a question. Not a command, a question. 1 Kings 3:5. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Anything, power, wealth, long life, anything. 1 Kings 3:9. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? He did not ask for riches. He asked for wisdom. 1 Kings 3:12-13. I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings, wisdom, and everything that follows it. Under Solomon, Israel entered its greatest era. Peace filled the land, wealth increased, nations took notice. 1 Kings 4:29-30. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. His reputation spread. Kings listened. Queens traveled just to hear him speak. First, Kings 10, verse 6-7. She said to the king, The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard." And then he built something no king before him had built. 1 Kings 6:11-13. The word of the Lord came to Solomon. "As for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, observe my laws, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father. And I will live among the Israelites, a dwelling place for God among his people." This was the height, the peak. Nothing was lacking. But Solomon's fall did not begin with rebellion. It began with allowance. 1 Kings 11:1. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. This was not new information. God had already spoken about it, clearly. 1 Kings 11:2. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love, and slowly, that is exactly that happened. Not in a moment, not in a day, but over time. Kings 11:4. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. The wisest man lost his direction, not because he lacked knowledge, but because he stopped guarding his heart. Solomon did what no king before him had done. 1 Kings 11:5-6. He followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. Not fully. That was the difference. Not complete rejection, but incomplete devotion. And just like with Saul, and just like with David, God responded. 1 Kings 11:11. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Not immediately, but inevitably." 1 Kings 11:12-13. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe, for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. Solomon would finish his reign, but the kingdom would not survive him. He began with wisdom. He lived in abundance. He built greatness, but in the end his heart was divided. 3 kings, 1 kingdom, 3 different paths. Saul lost his kingdom because he would not fully obey. David fell but returned with a broken heart, and through him the promise of a lasting kingdom remained. Solomon had everything but slowly drifted away. Same throne, same God, different hearts. Because in the end, it was never about the crown. It was always about the heart. Now, how do we make sense of all this? Let's look at it in parts. The history of Saul, David, and Solomon is more than an ancient chronicle. It is a blueprint of the human condition. Though they ruled thousands of years ago, their internal battles are the same ones we fight in our careers, our families, and our inner lives. 1. The Saul lesson. The danger of people-pleasing and insecurity. Saul's downfall wasn't a lack of ability, it was a lack of identity. He was head and shoulders above everyone else, yet he felt smaller than everyone else. The modern impact. In the age of social media and likes, we are all susceptible to the Saul trap. Saul cared more about the applause of the people than the principles of his calling. If your self-worth is built on the validation of others, you will eventually sabotage your own success. Leadership requires the courage to be misunderstood. Insecurity, when left unchecked, turns into envy, just as it did when Saul turned against David. Your character must be taller than your reputation. 2. The David lesson: the power of radical accountability. David's life teaches us that greatness is not the absence of failure, but the presence of repentance. David committed sins that were arguably worse than Saul's, yet he is remembered as Israel's greatest king. The modern impact: we live in a cancel culture where mistakes are often seen as final. David's story argues for a different path: extreme ownership. When confronted with his shadow, David didn't make excuses or blame his upbringing. He said, "I have sinned. You will fall. You will hurt people. You will make mistakes that cannot be undone." The moral of David is that your end doesn't have to be defined by your fall, but by how you pick yourself up. At the end of the end, authenticity is more valuable than perfection. 3. The Solomon lesson: the paradox of success and distraction. Solomon is the ultimate cautionary tale for the successful person. He had the wisdom to solve everyone's problems except his own. He built a temple for God, but filled his life with distractions that pulled him away from that very source. The modern impact: we are the most informed generation in history, yet we lack wisdom. Solomon proves that you can have all the resources, money, and intellectual data in the world and still lose your direction. Success is often more dangerous than failure. While failure makes you lean on others, success can make you feel self-sufficient and above the rules. Solomon's end reminds us that a strong start does not guarantee a strong finish. Wisdom is not just knowing what is right, it is the discipline to keep doing it. The united conclusion: the most profound moral of the united monarchy is the word united itself. As long as these kings remained united within themselves, aligning their actions with their values, the nation stayed together. The moment they became divided in their hearts, Saul by fear, David by lust, Solomon by indulgence, the nation fractured. This is a final thought for you. The kingdom you lead might just be your family, your business, or simply your own life. But the lesson of the three kings remains. You cannot sustain an empire on the outside if you are crumbling on the inside. Saul, David, and Solomon weren't just kings of Israel. They are versions of us. And by learning from their end, we can perhaps change our own.